Hi, this is Dave Bushon, and welcome to 99hobbies.com. Today we meet Rob Macedo, KD1CY, and hear about ARIES, Skywarn, weather spotting, and some special field day considerations that you need to think about. Okay, today I have Rob Macedo on the phone. Hi, Rob. How you doing?
Good, and yourself?
Just great. I'm glad you took the time to join us here today. I know you're a busy guy.
No, glad to be on here, and thanks for being flexible with my crazy schedule here.
Rob is the, among other things, he's the SEC for Eastern Massachusetts. Maybe you could explain what that entails, being the SEC.
Sure. The ARIES Section Emergency Coordinator coordinates the ARIES program, which is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, which is a program sponsored by the American Radio Relay League. And the goal, really, of the SEC is to kind of coordinate activity at a somewhat higher level in the section than what emergency coordinators and district emergency coordinators do. The SEC kind of governs what the ECs and DECs do over their geographic areas, or they may be appointed to serve certain liaison functions to agencies such as the Red Cross or Salvation Army. The Section Emergency Coordinator will try and develop a section communications plan, will try and communicate with all of his ECs, DECs, and ARIES members to provide robust emergency communications support to largely non-governmental organizations, although ARIES is the primary contributed to the National Weather Service, the Skywarn program, which we'll probably talk about here in a few minutes. And we also coordinate with the NGOs, as I mentioned, such as American Red Cross, the Salvation Army. We also will work closely with RACES, which is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services. And that program is largely run by emergency management at either the city or town, county, or state/regional level, and they primarily support their EMAs and government officials at the city and town or state level. We may provide additional support of amateurs at the request of the RACES folks. They usually appoint RACES radio officers and operators. So we also kind of play a supplemental role for them. And we also support, again, the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs such as Red Cross and Salvation Army. And there are memorandums of understanding at the national level and as well as the local and regional level with various Red Cross chapters and with the Red Cross national headquarters and with the Salvation Army and their program called Saturn, which is the Salvation Army Team Emergency Response Network. So the Section Emergency Coordinator really kind of does coordination at a higher level, works with the local emergency coordinators and district emergency coordinators to assure that we have cohesive emergency communications across the section and that those agencies that wish to have our support have our support. And we try to also solicit more agencies to look into amateur radio as well. Certainly with the floods of 2006 that we had in northeastern Massachusetts, we noticed a bit of an increase in these people wanting to know more about ARIES, and also agencies started soliciting us for possibility of support for their various needs. So certainly when things happen, amateur radio and ARIES gets more visibility, and when things aren't happening, it has less visibility. And really the SEC's job is to kind of coordinate that at a higher level and then work with his staff to make sure the program runs smoothly.
And there's a lot of good information on the website. I'll put that in the show notes here so people can kind of browse around and see this. You mentioned Skywarn a little while ago. What's that all about?
So the Skywarn program is the National Weather Service's volunteer weather spotting program where timely severe weather reporting into the Weather Service helps protect life and property. Doppler weather radar and satellite imagery and all of the high-tech tools that we have with weather models and so forth are all very helpful and have really advanced the art of meteorology. However, there is still a strong emphasis on the need for ground truth or surface reports to help correspond with what the technology is seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And the Skywarn program provides that. There are over 5,000 spotters in the National Weather Service Taunton County warning area, which includes 2 counties in southern New Hampshire, Cheshire, and Hillsborough, all of Massachusetts except for Berkshire County, all of Rhode Island, and Hartford, Talon, and Windham counties of northern Connecticut. The program is sponsored by the Weather Service, the Amateur Radio Emergency Services, or ARIES, provides the support in most places across the country, certainly with the National Weather Service in Taunton, where I serve as the office Skywarn coordinator. It's run as an ARIES program. And again, the goal is to provide reporting based on certain criteria. And there's a training session that is offered to kind of teach this criteria, cloud features associated with severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, preparedness for severe weather and hurricanes and winter storms and flooding. It's all kind of rolled up in this training session, and you walk out of there with a spotter ID card, a special 800 line that you can call into. There's also a web form that can be used to bring in reports, but clearly during severe weather and a lot of the more major incidents and cases where we needed ground truth and surface reports on a quick basis, we actually have a whole amateur radio station at the weather office so that we can coordinate the effort, get net controls on all the various repeaters, run the nets, and make sure all of the reports and data flow into the Weather Service. That's really what we like to do on the ham side. It helps to keep the meteorologists focused on the meteorology while we just provide the data input that they need so that they have that surface information. They can then look at their tools of technology and come up with the best possible forecasts and warnings. And very often I've seen them not warn, whether it be severe thunderstorms or flash flooding or whatnot. They won't issue those warnings until they get some surface reports that indicate the storms have produced the flooding or hail or wind damage or whatever is expected with the activity. So certainly there are times they may do it without that reporting because they really feel, based on the technology and the radar signatures, that there are issues. But clearly it's much easier for them when they're getting the surface reports real time. And it should also be noted that the radar isn't infallible. We had a situation in late May where the activity was what we would say is low-topped, or just, not very high up into the atmosphere. And the radar was really overshooting where the worst activity of the storms were until the activity was right on top of the radar. And there were several instances where warnings were issued based on weather spotters and amateur radio operators who were trained weather spotters giving reports of wind damage and hail that the radar just wasn't seeing. And if it wasn't for that reporting, we wouldn't have had the warnings and have been able to protect the public, or at least the Weather Service wouldn't. As I said, I'm a volunteer with the weather office. So that really kind of gives you a description on the Skywarn program and where amateur radio fits in. It should be noted, too, that despite only 1/3 of the spotters being amateur radio operators, the amateur radio operators are responsible for clearly over 90% of the flooding and damage reports and hail reports, and probably about half to 2/3 of the rain and snowfall reports that get received. So it's really a tremendous effort that the amateur radio community across the 4 states and the 5 ARRL sections do for the National Weather Service.
I'd be willing to bet that most people would have no idea what goes on behind the scenes like this. It's an amazing amount of work. I bet you there's a lot of details that need to be looked after too.
Yeah, I mean, certainly at the weather office when the severe weather is happening, you have meteorologists that are feeling the pressure, and they're also feeling the excitement of the situation. And we're pressured quite often. We aren't getting reports, what is happening here in certain locations that they're seeing on the radar that they're very concerned about. And, we have to be very calm on the air and collective and be able to, provide the information and provide it accurately. So it really, it's been certainly a lot of fun. I've been involved with the work there for 10 years. It's a huge public service aspect, and it kind of pays dividends with for us for cases like with Field Day weekend coming up. I mean, we have an event coming up where we're going to have a lot of amateurs outdoors and camping and setting up the antennas and looking for a fun event, and we need to be able to keep them safe. And one of the things that we've been doing for the last several years at one level or another, depending on the weather for that weekend, is we've provided, through email updates and also actual on-air support from the Weather Service, what we call, field day protection services, if you will, and that's trying to protect the field day sites. If we have even just garden variety thunderstorms that aren't severe, that produce a lot of lightning, that's a serious safety issue for our field day sites. And many of these sites, granted, the internet has certainly come a long ways, and now even mobile internet is possible, where it probably wasn't a few years ago. But a lot of folks don't have it, or they're not really looking at it. They're contesting, they're cooking out on their grills, and they're trying to enjoy the weekend, and enjoy an amateur radio weekend, and they're not really paying attention to that aspect. So, we'll try and get on from the weather office. We always encourage field day sites to just try and leave a radio on their Skywarn repeater that they typically use or are aware of, and if they have questions, they see some activity that they're worried about, or if we see activity that we think they should be worried about, be able to make contact so that they can be safe. They can get their antennas down or get away from the antennas and equipment until the storms have passed, so that they don't become a lightning injury or fatality. Sure. And the other thing was, with last year, the other problem we had was less thunderstorms and more the heat. And we've even had some cases where people were taken away from field day sites due to heat stroke and heat exhaustion. And we tried to emphasize before field day how extremely hot it was going to be that weekend last year, so that people would dress for it appropriately and drink a lot of liquids, and avoid overexerting themselves in the extreme heat that we had. So that's another aspect. Because we have such a strong relationship with the Weather Service, and we support them so much, they allow us to kind of come in, and the meteorologists are helpful in providing this information so we can keep our amateur operators safe during a fun event like Field Day that also has a emergency communications component to it, in that you're setting up those field day sites out at various locations.
That's some interesting points to consider. I think that what you said is exactly true. A lot of people are so focused on the operation, having fun, maybe cooking out and so forth, that they forget that we would have an even larger than normal exposure to weather-related problems that might develop. It's good to keep that in mind.
Yes, and again, we're not trying to be... again, Field Days to be a fun event. It does practice some emergency communication components to it, and we don't like to put a tamper on those activities. In fact, last year we were able to participate in some of those activities for the first time in a very long time, because other than the heat and just telling people to be prepared for it, there weren't any thunderstorm activity in the area until after Field Day was pretty much over. So, certainly I had gone to my local club and participated from there for a while, and visited a couple of other sites in my local area, and enjoyed it. This weekend, it's really kind of questionable weather-wise what's going to happen, but there looks to be the possibility of thunderstorms and potentially heavy rainfall Friday into Saturday for parts of the area. And the exact areas, it's tough to determine right now, but it looks like Field Day setup Friday into Saturday could be affected by thunderstorms and their attendant lightning risk, and there is the potential for heavy rainfall with these storms, and a potential, especially on Friday at least, for severe weather defined as wind damage, damaging winds measured 58 miles per hour or greater, and hail 3/4 inch in diameter or larger, and certainly strong storms capable of smaller hail and winds 40 miles per hour or greater may also occur on Friday. So that's something that we'll be watching and trying to get the field day sites and those that are participating outdoors kind of prepared for that and be ready to take cover if needed. And hopefully it won't be as bad as what maybe the forecasters are thinking right now, but if it is, we'll just kind of brace people for it and protect them while we're at the same time gathering the reports to get people warned upstream from where the storms are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one very important thing to consider or to take care of in the planning phases for field day, and I hope that all of our listeners out there take that into consideration when they're making their plans for this weekend.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to overlook. Preparedness in general, and this is more, and this kind of goes a little bit beyond amateur radio, but preparedness for situations, it can be key. And field day here, people should be prepared. Look at the weather and just be sort of prepared for what might happen, but at the same time not let it squelch them having a fun time with the event. But to have that preparedness ready in case something does indeed happen. And certainly, as we get into our hurricane season and what the floods of May taught us, preparedness is the key. If you're if you're in a flood-prone area, be prepared to deal with what that might bring. If you're in if we have a hurricane situation, power outages for longer periods of time and so forth may occur, and just be prepared to deal with that for the first several days. Anywhere between 3 to maybe as long as 7 days, and then if you're prepared for that, you'll be in better shape overall as the infrastructure comes back after such an incident.
Well, that's a lot to think about. I'm going to put the link, like I said, to the site here, and I'm going to actually, as soon as we're done talking here, I'm going to go digging around through this a little bit more. We've just barely scratched the surface on this, but it's a fascinating subject. I think maybe you and I have to talk again and go into some more detail. You were talking about some work you did with a hurricane and VOIP. Maybe we can hook up again sometime and talk about that.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'd be happy to do it.
Okay, well, Rob Macedo, KD1CY, thanks for being on 99 Hobbies and 73.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave.